Hey everyone, Charlie Murphy here, playing another session of $1, $2, no limit 6-max regular speed tables on Ignition. Our games are up and running, so let's jump right in. Upper left-hand table, we raise first in from the button with ace-6 suited. We have a recreational player that's been limping pre-flop already. He goes ahead and calls. On the ace-5-5 rainbow board, we'll just go ahead and range bet small. Be checking back most turns with the weak ace in that situation. Upper left-hand table will again open, this time from the cutoff with 9-7 suited. Upper right-hand table, we face a 2.5x raise first in from the cutoff while we're on the big blind. We'll 3-bet about 10% of our hands, including pocket pairs, roughly 8s or better, so jacks is very clearly in that range. Upper left-hand table, the recreational player calls from the small blind. The big blind squeezes us to about 5x. A bit larger than typical sizing, but it's because there's the squeeze situation, so he should be using a slightly larger sizing. However, in this formation, in position, I don't think we need to be calling with the hand as weak as 9-7 suited, so I'm going to go ahead and fold this. Upper right-hand table, we face a button limp from a suspected recreational player on 33 blinds. We're going to isolate out of the blinds with a roughly 12 to 13% range, including ace-queen offsuit. We'll also go ahead and tag him as a rec. Lower right-hand table, we raised first in from middle position with ace-queen suited. We're now going to go ahead and check range on the 8-5-3 two-tone board. The recreational player who's been limping pre-flop goes ahead and checks back. We're going to start betting. We've got a draw to a very strong hand if it comes in, a very robust draw that obviously is good on any diamond. So I'm going to go ahead and use the overbet size here just as I want this pot to be bigger if my diamond draw hits. Try to set him up if he peels with weaker flush draws to cooler him in a much larger pot and use the overbet to make that pot bigger and build that situation that we're hoping to get ourselves into. Upper left-hand table, we face a 2.5x raise first in from the button. We're on the big blind. We can go ahead and use a standard defense set of ranges here for a button first raise first in, thinking this guy is probably some kind of reg. That's going to include 3-betting roughly 14-15% range, including our suited connectors like 8-7 suited. So I'm going to go ahead and pop this up. We'll use something like 8s or better. Suited connectors 5-4 or better, suited broadways, suited 9x, a few suited 8x hands like Jack-8, 10-8, a couple suited wheel aces like Ace-5, Ace-4, and then some large offsuit Broadway hands like Ace-King, Ace-Queen, Ace-Jack, King-Queen to make out my 3-bet range there in that big blind defense spot against the button on the upper left-hand table. Small blind raises first in the upper left-hand table. Again, we'll use kind of a standard defense range, this time from the small blind, a roughly 15% range. It can include all our suited aces, such as ace-deuce suited, so we'll go ahead and pop that one up as well. Lower left-hand table, we'll open pocket 4s from the cutoff. We face a small blind 3-bet in that lower left-hand table to about 4.5x. And this is towards the bottom of our defense range. Against a solver, it's a clear call. Against the player pool that's slightly tighter, it gets a bit murkier. This is probably towards the bottom of the defense range, though, but I think it's okay to call here. It's very close, and you could also fold, but I think calling's okay. Upper left-hand table, we'll open Jack-9, blind on blind. Lower right-hand table, I don't really call very much in the big blind here against a limp in an isolation range, but it's small. Pocket 8 is going to play very well. going to play very well, even multi-way if both players call me, if I can hit that set. I'm going to go ahead and call this, even though I don't call a ton in that spot with the player still to act behind me that could limp re-raise or could, just call and make me play out of position against two different players. Upper left-hand table will check range on King 5 Deuce Rainbow. Lower left-hand table on the 10 9 8 two-tone board will just fold our pocket fours, even against that small bet size. I'll check fold Jack high with no real equity and only very weak backdoor equity in the blind bat on the upper left-hand table. Lower left-hand table, the recreational player bets about a third of the pot, donk bets about a third of the pot out on 9-5-3 two-tone. The in-position player flats. Pocket eights is too strong to fold in that spot, so we're going to go ahead and call and just sort of evaluate the hand on later streets. Upper right-hand table, the cutoff raises first in. We're going to 3-bet aggressively from the button, roughly a 13% range, including ace-queen offsuit. I'm also going to shuffle this table out as the recreational player I was targeting. Well, he hasn't left the table yet, so perhaps he's not exactly quitting. I'm going to stick around and see if this guy stays or if this guy goes. If this guy goes, the rest of the table seems pretty reggy. I'll leave. However, he's back in, so I think we will stay. Lower right-hand table, the reg-type player in position. Now he bets the turn. He bets pretty hard, roughly 75%. I think I can go ahead and fold this absent some real good reads. That card does coordinate and make some straights like ace-4 or 4-6 suited. I could be behind sets that he was trapping with and didn't raise on the flop, or even 9x type hands. I think I'd continue with my good draws either for a call or a raise, and my 9x type hands, and of course my nut type hands. Pocket eights I think is just weak enough we can go ahead and fold Mata Way. Against smaller bet sizes or against the check back, I'm feeling a lot better about that hand. But when this player continues to put money in, I'm a little bit less convinced that my hand is going to be good. Lower right-hand table will raise blind on blind against the recreational player. Probably use a standard open range there, of which ace-king suited is clearly a part of. Lower left-hand table, we get a button raise first in, a small blind 3-bet. That's going to be a cold 4-bet or fold situation. Ace-7 suited is very much not a part of that, or ace-7 offsuit, rather, is not a part of that. Ace-7 suited would not be either. I'd probably be 4-betting to call off with 10s plus and ace-king, and then be mixing in suited Broadway, ace-queen offsuit type bluffs, and maybe another pair or two that's not quite good enough to 4-bet call, like pocket 9s or pocket 8s. Lower right-hand table, we can raise first in blind on blind with roughly a standard range against the recreational player. Queen 10 suited is clearly a part of that, and then we will check range out of position on the Queen 9-6 rainbow board. 6 on the turn. Trying to decide here. I was going to start betting this. I may lean more towards check because I'm not that worried about better hands outdrawing me on a free card. Overcards aren't that scary on a board like this. I think this player's range is going to have a lot of weak marginal stuff that can't call bets but might start bluffing. So I'm just going to go ahead and continue checking with my decent top pair. And of course, I'm going to go ahead and call that when he bets half pot and check to him again on the river. Lower left-hand table, Jack-3 suited is probably slightly outside my standard open range. However, I have no reason to think these blinds are sufficiently aggressive enough to punish me, so we'll expand our range even if ever so slightly, and you open that hand from the button. When the recreational player stabs, again, a little bit under half pot, nothing to do but clearly call this with queens and tens. And he had trip sixes, which is okay. He'll have that some of the time, but that's why I didn't want to go ahead and raise, as I don't know that I get called by too many worse hands. He can still have lots of 6x. And he can have lots of just absolute nonsense air bluffs in his range, too, so I think playing that hand the way we did is pretty reasonable. Lower left-hand table, we get called by the big blind, and we get a 10-7, ace-10-7 two-tone board. We'll go ahead and range bet that small. We have some backdoor straight draws here we can consider barreling on the turn based on which cards peel off. We get called. We pick up bottom pair, the pair of threes. This doesn't really have a ton of showdown value, so there may be some merit to using a small pair as a bluff on the turn on some textures. In this spot where, let's see, we're going to have aces, 10s, 7s, 3s, all combos of ace 10, ace 7, and pretty much all combos of ace 3, 7, 10 suited as well. He shouldn't have a lot of those hands either pre-flop from re-raising as well as check-raising the flop. We've also got ace-king, ace-queen, ace-jack, which he doesn't have as many combos of, again, because of pre-flop and flop action. And there's so many draws. You know, there's 9-10, or 8-9 out there, rather, for an open-ender. There's various gut shots to Broadway, jack-8, jack-9, and the low gut shots. Given I've got so many better draws to choose from, I think I can go ahead and check back bottom pair and not use that as a bluff, just because I'll have way too many bluffs if I also start betting bottom pair in addition to all my flush draws, gut shots. There's diamond draws and spade draws out there on the turn. That board is very, very dry. So no need to turn a hand like bottom pair into a bluff on that turn situation. Upper right-hand table, we open ace-5 suited from under the gun. We get called by what appears to be a recreational player playing on 12 blinds. We have a queen-10-3 two-tone board. I'm just going to go ahead and put a small bet in here on this flop. Against that river overbet with a very, very weak bluff catcher, not even really strong enough to be considered a bluff catcher, as I lose to some bluffs like bottom pair type hands. Nothing to do but just go ahead and fold that one. Upper right-hand table, we get check-raised all in for another 10 blinds, about a pot-size bet. We have the stone-cold nuts, so of course we call off. We're against middle pair, no draw. Got him drawing pretty much dead, drawing to runner, full houses and quads. But not too much interest in there, not much to discuss. You know, you bet small, you've got the flush, we get check-raised all in with the nuts, and you call. Lower left-hand table, a cutoff player opens. He's been tight, but only through 2 orbits. Not enough information to go ahead and determine this guy as being tighter than typical, so we'll defend with a standard range from our big blind. That's going to include 3-betting, you know, a roughly 9 or 10% range. You know, suited Broadway-type cards like king-queen suited are very good candidates to be in that range. And I would 3-bet that king-queen suited almost all the time as a default or as a standard. Lower left-hand table is breaking, but we will play this blind-on-blind spot and raise king-8 suited first in. When we get re-raised in position 3x, this is probably too weak to go ahead and try to defend a 3-bet with a call. When I face a 3-bet in position blind-on-blind, you know, I'm probably going to be defending with all my pocket pairs. You know, some of them 4-bet to call off, probably 10s or better. I can defend my suited connectors, 5-4 suited and up, and all my suited Broadway cards as well. That gives me good board coverage, so I can go ahead and check raise or check call down on pretty much any texture if need be. But there's no need to have a hand as weak as king-8 suited in there, as it's just too easily dominated by a lot of his 3-betting hands. We can go ahead and quit this table at this point. Lower right-hand table, we're going to open first in from the button. Given that these players have both been pretty loose, I'm probably not going to expand my range too much, though they have been passive, so I'll play hands that can make strong hands, even like offsuit connectors or suited cards. So I guess I would in fact expand my range, because even though they've been loose, they've been passive, and they seem like they're probably kind of fishy, and they're deep stacks, so there's some implied odds there to deal with. Ace Jack Jack two-tone, we'll go ahead and range bet small. Upper left-hand table, we face a very large raise first in, a 4x raise first in from the cutoff. We can still defend this with some calls, and I'm going to be a lot tighter than I otherwise would be. I will still call pocket sixes, but I'm going to be a lot more cautious with my suited connected type hands, my weak suited aces. I'm going to fold a lot more of those than you otherwise would, just because his size is so large. 10-7 deuce two-tone board, we check range, he checks back, we peel off an 8 of clubs. I'm trying to decide if there's any merit in betting this. I think I'm just going to go ahead and check it, as I can still call down lots of rivers on 9s for flush run odds. I'd rather the pot's smaller on those cards. He goes ahead and bets half pot. I'm not sure what he's going to start betting the turn with that doesn't bet the flop that's strong there, except for a hand specifically like pocket eights, which should probably be betting larger. I'm not going to go ahead and fold this a pair with some backdoor draws thus far. I'm going to go ahead and call this down and evaluate on the river. He checks back. He was just kind of stabbing apparently with air over cards at that point, and our sixes were good. Check and see what he has in a minute. Upper right-hand table, we open Queen Jack suited from middle position, get called in position and by a blind as well. A 6-5-4 two-tone, we check range, it checks through. A 10 peels on the turn. I might start stabbing that. Had it checked to me just with nobody showing any real concern for the pot. But when the blind blasts into a 2 players for pot, and we don't really have any equity but just some overcards, I'm content to just go ahead and fold that. I've got all my sets there. I've got my overpairs. I've got my flush draws. I've got some, King 7, Ace 7 suited type hands that are open-ended straight draws to continue with. I've got various 10x like Ace 10, King 10, Queen 10, Jack 10, 10-9 suited. I've got lots of hands I can continue with there. I don't have any need to go ahead and continue with the hand as weak as Queen Jack of clubs. No draws, just a couple of overcards. Take a look at what he stabbed with on that sixes hand so we have a better idea of how this player plays. He had ace-9 offsuit, so he picked up an open-ended straight draw and he stabbed that on the turn, which I think that's a pretty reasonable hand to bet with. He might need to follow through on the river to try to fold me off there if he's going to go ahead and bet that turn. I don't know if I was going to lay it down or not, but I don't know that showing down ace-high in that particular line is a winning play, so I'm not sure I love his play very much there. Upper left-hand table, we raise first in from the button with King-Queen offsuit. We get check 2 after the big blind defends. We have an Ace-Queen-6 two-tone flop. We'll go ahead and range bet small. Checking back most turns, pretty much any non-queen turn I think we'll be checking back, whether a diamond hits or not, whether we pick up some equity with a straight draw. We'd be betting, good aces and better on most turns, checking back second pair in almost all cases. New table has a suspected recreational player to our immediate right, playing on about 30 blinds. Player to the left, he's got some money in this pot, but he's only got 73 blinds. He's also a suspected rec, and the player directly across from us sitting on 88, though he has some money in the pot. I'm less certain about him based on stack size so far. Although he started this hand under 100 blinds. You got 4 guys with about 5 blinds in there each, so he started about 93, 94 deep. So this table looks promising so far just based on stack size alone. Upper right-hand table has the 1 rec to our immediate left. We're going to go ahead and raise on the table from under the gun with ace-queen offsuit. Standard something like 17% raise first in range would be appropriate. Hands like ace-10 or better, king-jack or better, pocket pairs, suited aces, suited 9x or better. We get called in position by the button. We have a queen 8-6 two-tone flop. We're going to go ahead and check range out of position to him, although not planning to fold this hand. Certainly not on the flop, and probably not at any point, given that we have top pair, top kicker. We're going to go ahead and check call the half-size pot stab, and we're going to go ahead and check again on the offsuit 10 that peels off. Now he checks back the turn, so I'm a lot less worried that he has a hand like 8 sixes, 10s, queen 10. Those are going to very heavily bet the turn. Given that I think my hand is now good, I'm not that worried about him having a nut type hand. I'm going to go ahead and try to value bet this, try to get hero called by 8, 9, pocket 7s, pocket 9s, 10x with the flush draw that peeled short on value on the turn, etc., etc. I think value bet's the very clear play here. And we get raised up, which is a very odd play. He's not repping very much in this particular line. Upper left-hand table will fold Jack 4 in the blind battle facing a 3x raise first in. Let me see here. It's almost a pot-size raise. I have no reason to think these raises are over-bluffed. He's probably not doing this with a hand as weak as king-queen, so I don't dominate value, which means my hand is effectively a pure bluff catcher against this raise if I don't think he can do this with a hand like king-queen, and I really don't think that he would or should. You know, given that river raises are so under-bluffed and tend to be so strong, in-position reg-type players are not very bluffy in position because their range starts out so condensed and so strong and so tight. I'm more inclined to give him credit for getting tricky with some kind of set type hand that checked back, or maybe even a hand like pocket deuces that stabbed the flop and stumbled into it. I'm going to go ahead and fold, as I just can't give this guy credit for enough bluffs to justify calling down, or to be value raising with a worse hand like queen jack, king queen that I actually beat. So I'm going to go ahead and make what appears to be a fairly tight fold, just because I don't think a player can be all that bluffy in that line. Lower right-hand table, we checked in the big blind against an under-the-gun limper and small blind completer with our ace-9 offsuit, probably slightly too weak to go ahead and isolation raise out of the blinds. We check range in the big blind on the queen 9-3 two-tone. We face a 6 turn, and we go ahead and check again, as we're not really trying to make queens or kings fold, you know, and we're not trying to really get value from too many worse hands either, so that hand's right smack in the middle of hands that are too weak to value bet and too strong to bluff. When it checks again, I will go ahead and try to get some value on the river here with a third pair top kicker. Upper right-hand table, we'll go ahead and check range in the blind battle after raising with ace-10. We got called by a recreational player in position. We now have a king 10-10-9 double flush draw turn board. I've got top trips. I'm going to go ahead and overbet this and hope I can get called down by flush draws, king X that gets sticky. Not that worried about king queen at this point, or queen jack at this point. So I think it's okay to go ahead and overbet and try to get value with my top trips. Lower right-hand table, we got called in 2 spots by a weak 9x and ace-6, you know, the river fourth pair top kicker. So we actually got value from 2 players on that. I'm pretty happy about the way that played out. Queen 5 suited, slightly too weak to isolate in a typical sense against an under-the-gun player. Usually use queen 6 or better, but he's weak. Recreational player playing 52-0 with a lot of limps over 23 hands. The blinds do not seem particularly loose or aggressive that will punish me for expanding my range too much. So I'm going to isolate slightly wider than I might normally do, just because I don't think the blinds will punish me, and I think I want to get into a pot with this weak recreational player that's limping under the gun. Or just take it down pre-flop and pick up 2.5 blinds that are laying out there, as we did. That's also a pretty good result. That's even a better result than getting to the flop, honestly. Under the gun, raises first in, upper left-hand table. We will not defend with 9-7 suited in the cutoff. We'll play 3-better fold on that spot, as we typically do in non-big blind positions pre-flop. In 9-7 suited, it's just going to be too weak. You know, we're going to have roughly an 8.5% range against an under the gun raise first in. In 9-7 suited is just really not even that close to the range of hands I want to have in there. There's much better candidates to use if you're using a 3-better fold strategy. Let's see here. Lower left-hand table, get a recreational player limps. He gets isolated by the cutoff and then 3-bet by the big blind. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to treat this as a cold 4-bet or a fold situation. I feel like I can still stack off as lightly as queens, queens plus ace-king, and then mix in some of my cold 4-bet bluffs as well to give me some balance, or at least the appearance thereof. I would not have too many bluffs with all this money in the pot already out there, as there's so much reward for somebody to 5-bet jam. I don't want to be cold 4-betting and folding very often for this, but a hand like pocket queens I'm still going to go with and force somebody to show me kings or aces in almost all formations, 100 blinds deep in a 6-max game. Limper folds out, the isolating player folds out, and the 3-betting player folds out, and we just pick up a pretty nice pot without having to see a flop. Upper right-hand table, we get a 3x open from the cutoff. We're going to go ahead and use a standard defense range. It's going to include 3-betting roughly 10%. Ace-9 suited kind of right on the cusp of hands I would 3-bet or call with. I'm going to go ahead and 3-bet this one, but a call would also be just fine. Lower right-hand table, get a recreational player limps under the gun. We're going to go ahead and limp our small blind with Ace-5 suited. And now down here on the lower left-hand table, again, we're going to have what I'm treating almost like a cold 4-bet or fold situation here with the limp, the isolation, and a couple cold callers. King-Jack suited is probably good enough to do that with. I can probably have about a 50-50 range of value bets to bluffs, and I can have queens plus ace-king to stack off here. I'm going to go ahead and pop this up again with King-Jack suited, kind of on the cusp. If you wanted to fold it or call it and try to sneak in the pot, I guess I don't hate that either, but I think it's okay to go ahead and squeeze this up and try to pick up all that dead money. Upper left-hand table, under the gun, or middle position, raises first in, 2.5x. We're going to 3-bet with our pocket aces. We get what appears to be a recreational player goes ahead and cold calls that. We get called in two positions by two players, both of whom are in position to us. We've got about a pot-sized bet left. I would normally check range here, but I'm against two fish with a strong but very vulnerable hand. And I don't really want to let spades, queens, tens, or an ace peel off or give somebody a chance to even make a better two-pair with some kind of janky ace-x type hand. We've only got a little under pot-sized bet left with the deeper player and only 15 blinds left, about a quarter of the pot or less against the shorter player. I'm just going to go ahead and ship this in. Ace-X never folds. Queen-X, especially with the pair, is not going to fold a ton. Spades aren't going to fold too much. I got called off by Ace-Queen, which is a good result. He outdraws me on the turn, but that's life. That's poker. But we got our hand in good. I deviated and jammed the flop when I often don't do that multi-way with multiple players in position to me. But there was a deviation based on the fish, the board texture, our hand being strong but vulnerable. And we got the money in good. We just didn't hold. But like I said, that's life and that's poker. But I'm happy with the way we played. I'm happy with that result. And my EV graph will look good even if my cash results won't look so good from that particular hand. So I'm good with the whole thing. I'm going to go ahead and tag this guy as a recreational player as well for playing on the shorter stack before that hand and cold calling all that action pre-flop. Up lower right-hand table, we raise first in with King 10 offsuit in middle position. We get called by a rec or a weak type reg in position on the button. We flop Queen Jack 8 open-ended straight draw on a rainbow board. We're just going to go ahead and check call this and not put in a check raise. Against a smaller bet size or a board less coordinated, I might check raise it, but I don't really think I'm going to have enough fold equity here against a guy that calls me in position. Even though I think he's a weaker reg, he's not playing very wacky pre-flop stats, 21-6. He's probably not cold calling a ton of hands that are garbage. His range is probably somewhat strong and less inclined to fold to a flop check raise semi-bluff, so I'm just going to go ahead and check call that. The turn is interesting in that he continues betting. I don't think I can check raise fold him off again for all the same reasons I discussed. I do have a lot of equity, and I'm getting a pretty decent price. I think I can go ahead and check call this and hope to peel either a 9 or a king. didn't happen. I played the hand more passive than I typically would, but I think it's okay. I'm not sure what else I would do differently. I don't love that I allowed him to get 2 barrels off me with an ace-high type hand that checked down is good, so perhaps my passivity punished me in that spot. But that was my logic. My logic doesn't always work out. That time it didn't. We get re-raised from the small blind, 4.5x, when we raise first in from middle position. We have a hand like pocket sevens, which is good enough to call, although admittedly kind of on the cusp, a little bit close. Probably towards the bottom of what I would defend with against the pool, which is going to be a bit tighter than a solver-approved defense range because of the pool's tendency is to be a bit too passive. 10, 6, 7, we flop middle set, a 2-tone coordinated board. He checks to me. I'm going to go ahead and use a half-pot stab. I'm not stabbing range, but a hand like middle set definitely wants to be bet on that board. We're going to go ahead and fold the king 10 suited against these raise, call, and the big 3-bet out of position. It's too large a cold 4-bet to really cold 4-bet bluff this hand. We get check raised all in, nothing to do but just go ahead and call off with middle set. We got pocket aces that perhaps overplayed its hand a little bit, but we're happy to stack them with our set. And I'm just going to go ahead and fold in this blind situation on the against that half-pot stab. I guess you could consider check raising that with the pivot straight draw and backdoor flush draw. It's not a bad candidate, but I opted just to fold it as well. It's probably pretty close, but it's a reasonable candidate for a check raise bluff if you want to do some of that. Upper right-hand table, 2.5x open from the big blind. We're in the button. We're going to go ahead and repop this guy with something like a standard 14% range, including our suited Broadway cards like Queen 10 suited. I might be a bit tighter against this guy because I just stacked his aces with the set and the 3-bet pot. Sometimes those guys get a bit tilty and play a bit fishier after that happens. I don't know for sure that's happening or that he's going to be particularly angry about me spiking a set with sevens and a 3-bet pot. So I'm not going to go ahead and make my range tighter, but the thought does cross my mind based on the recent action we just had. Lower left-hand table, we'll open pocket fives under the gun. Perhaps a little bit on the loose side, and a lot of players fold some of these smaller pairs under the gun. I mostly raised them because I like having sets in my range on all kinds of boards, but if you want to talk me into some folds, I think that's reasonable too. 9-6 suited is a bit outside of my standard cutoff range. We have a very tight button and kind of a weaker fishy reg in the small blind, and both blinds have been pretty passive. So I'm going to expand my range and open that from the cutoff, ever so slightly wider than I might otherwise do. Lower left-hand table, we get called by 2 players in position, at least one of whom is probably a recreational player, as he's played every single hand so far, and he's also limp whenever given the chance. We check range to him on the 10-4-4 two-tone. In position player, the second player, he seems more reggy-like. He bets 1/3 pot on the 10-4-4. With pocket fives, I'm going to go ahead and peel for that small bet at least once. If he bets larger, more like 2/3, half pot's closer, but more like 2/3 or more, I think I just go ahead and fold that. We get check raised minimum by this rec now from 3 to 6. I don't really love my hand, but I think if I peel a 5 on him and I'm getting such a great price, I can go ahead and get a lot of money in this pot. So I'm actually going to call this tiny-sized raise one time, not because I think my 5s are good, but because I think that he's going to make such massive mistakes in later streets if I do, in fact, hit a 5 on the turn. We'll just try to check down now here. Again, 10 hits on the turn, he checks back, then 3 of hearts on the river. It's possible he has a flush. It possibly has 4x. Possibly he has 10x. And he overbets 2x. Nothing for me to do but just go ahead and fold. The overbets from recreational players tend to be underbluffed pretty significantly. I've only got a very marginal bluff catcher. He's already shown some strength by raising on the flop. Really not even close decision to me. Just go ahead and fold that. We're going to fold 8-6 suited in the upper right-hand table as this weak recreational players like to call too much and force us to play out of position. Up lower right-hand table, our pocket nines face a very small 3-bet from the blinds. We're going to go ahead and flat call that from under the gun. You know, against that 3x 3-bet, we can call a ton, especially with hands like pocket pairs that make some very strong hands in position. King 10, 7, two-tone board, he checks to us. I'm just going to go ahead and check back. I'm not really trying to get him to fold off of better pairs like ace 10, ace king, king queen, pocket jacks, pocket queens. But I've got some showdown value with the ace on the turn. He bets half pot. I think it's fine. Just go ahead and fold this. I'm going to have a lot of better hands. Ace, you know, all kinds of ace X, all kinds of king X with gut shots. I'll have, you know, most of my sets will have bet the flop, but I could have some queen jack, some of which bets the flop, some of which checks back. I don't need to defend a hand as weak as nines. Lower right-hand table, especially with no real equity or no real great cards for it. Lower right-hand table, a couple recreational players limp. I'll isolate up from the big blinds with my ace-king offsuit. Upper left-hand table, queen 9 suited is a standard under-the-gun raise for me, so we'll bring that in as well. We can go ahead and tag this guy as a rec for playing on a short stack and for min-raising me from 2.5 to 5. Both the recs call me in the lower left-hand table, so we'll check range out of position on king, king 3 rainbow. Queen 9, we're going to go ahead and defend that min 3-bet, of course. Lower right-hand table, 3x open from the button. We're in the big blind. We can fold hands like jack deuce suited. We get a pretty strong bet from that in-position player who's been loose, aggressive, and wacky. So I'm just going to go ahead and be trapping with my trips top kicker. I'm not really scared of any cards. I don't want to blow him off his total air that just might start blasting away. We faced a monotone board, a half-pot bet on the upper right-hand table. I don't need to go ahead and check call that once. I don't love the situation at the same time. Lower left-hand table will keep checking to the rec. He moves all in. You know, I'm very concerned I'm either against an overpair, you know, or a strong draw, especially an overpair with a diamond. My hand is really a very marginal bluff catcher at this point. I don't have any reason to go ahead and bluff catch on a monotone board, which fish don't tend to bluff that heavily. I'm just going to go ahead and let that one go. Here the rec bets a half pot. I'm just going to go ahead and continue trapping and check to him one more time on the river. Give him a chance to put me all in for about 60% of pot. If he bets smaller than that for some reason, I will check raise him all in. I'm not that worried about the backdoor flush draw. He does not continue betting. I'm curious to see what it is that he had. Hope he didn't check down something decent, being scared of a backdoor flush himself. Now, he had 7-6 offsuit, so I guess he had some showdown value on the turn, although probably not all that much. But it just goes to show that on the flop, he starts blasting with 6 or 7 high, no pair, you know, no real draw. I guess a very weak backdoor gut shot, technically speaking. But a player like that with so much garbage in his range that's also shown aggressive tendencies, 72% aggression frequency over 18 opportunities. So he's got all kinds of nonsense in his range, and he's blasting away with it against checks. It's fine to just trap against a guy like that, especially with a hand that's so strong and so little ways to be outdrawn. Lower right-hand table, we're going to go ahead and check back on the ace-deuce-deuce two-tone board with both the blinds calling me. No reason to bet range multi-way in a spot like that. I'd be betting my trip twos, probably even my quad twos, and some good ace-x and some good flush draws. On the turn, now that nobody's shown any concern for this, I will go ahead and start stabbing, especially the fact that I don't have a ton of showdown value against middling pocket pairs. You know, I've also got that gut shot draw. I can fold out a lot of their range at the same time. I can barrel the river and fold out marginal stuff like mid pairs, queen X as well. So I think it's okay to start betting that, especially when they all check to me twice. They just haven't shown any real concern for that pot. They're largely surrendering, and we can start stabbing and blasting pretty heavily. I'm going to shuffle out the lower right-hand table list. Other than the one kind of suspected fish that's really more just like a weak passive reg, the other guys don't seem particularly fishy either. Not world beaters, but not true fish. And there seems to be some fish at the other tables in the pool right now, so I think I can get a better table. Upper right-hand table will open Jack 4 suited blind down blind against the recreational player. Lower left-hand table is a couple of fish in position, and seat 3 has been pretty loose. He hasn't been passive, but he's been very loose, so we'll keep an eye on him as well. We've got a couple of wrecks across from me on the upper left-hand table, so that one's pretty promising, and the guy in direct position to me on the upper right-hand table. So I've got pretty reasonably confirmed fish on 3 of the 4 tables. I'll shuffle out the 4th and try to find a softer one there too. Lower right-hand table, Jack-8 suited's kind of on the cusp of a standard open for me in that spot. I don't open it as a default, but it's just outside the range of hands I would. I've got passive players in position and type passive player in the blind. This guy's not type, but he is passive. This guy over here has been very, very, very tight and passive so far. Given that they're going to let me get in position because these guys are pretty tight and passive and nobody's 3-betting enough, I'll go ahead and open it, and everybody just instantly folded. I picked up an extra blind and a half by expanding my range ever so slightly in that spot because the player's tendencies at the table. And we're going to go ahead and close that one out now as, like I said, it's a bunch of tight passive nits and not a lot of fish. And while I don't mind playing against them, the fish are going to make more money for me than the passive nit players. So I want to find a table with some true fish instead. Four or five suited is a bit too weak to open under the gun in general on the upper right-hand table, so I'm just going to go ahead and fold it. Upper left-hand table, this is interesting. There's a weak player who min-raises middle position. We've got a hand like ace-4 offsuit. He also gets called in position by another weak recreational player. The 2x raise first in, I defend my big blind very heavily because the price is so good. A player in position cuts against that, but the fact that he's weak also leans in the favor of calling. You could talk me into folding this, I suppose, but the price is so good and there's 2 wrecks in the pot, I think calling's going to be just fine. Give somebody a chance to make a foolish mistake if I hit something strong for a pre-flop price that's very, very good. And then we'll check range, of course, on the Jack-10-9 two-tone board, and I'm just going to go ahead and check fold to the half-pot bet without too much going on for my hand, except a small backdoor 4-card flush draw with that 4 of hearts. Having trouble finding another table other than this one right here that just appears to have 3 other regs with full stacks. I'll give it another couple minutes, another couple tries, but if I can't find a different one, I'll just take that table for a few orbits and see how those guys are playing. Upper left-hand table, Queen 9 offsuit on the button. That's a standard open. So we'll go ahead and open that, though near the bottom of a standard open range, but still a fine hand to raise first in. Lower right-hand table, we've got 2 Recs, one limping out of the gun, the other one in the big blind. We can go ahead and complete the small blind with 4-6 suited. Upper left-hand table will open 10-8 suited from the cutoff. That's also a standard open. And then we get an isolation raise from the big blind and a 2x limp re-raise from the limper under the gun. We can get out of the way with our 6-4 suited. Upper left-hand table, Jack 9-7 two-tone or rainbow flop. We flop the nut straight. We're going to go ahead and start betting small. Upper right-hand table, I'm going to expand my range and open Queen 8 offsuit because the small blind is fishy, and both blinds have been passive, and they're sitting on full stacks. Turn is a poor card for my hand as it puts a 4 straight out there and now makes the straight very obvious. I would continue betting with my Queen 10s to try to get a lot of money in against the naked 10. I'm going to also bet some 10x and check some 10x back. I like the idea of checking back the 10x that has a pair on this particular turn, as that blocks the 2 pair or set hands that could be calling to try to fill up against my straight. I block the stuff that could continue that I'm ahead of, the stuff that could be drawing, which I want to keep in there. And I want to have some 10x in my check back range, so the check back range has a semblance of balance as well. There's the other card to counterfeit my straight more completely. It's now on the board. And I'm going to take a look and see what this guy does. He bets 2/3. I'm not going to go ahead and try to raise him off. If I had a queen X, or if I had king queen, I would of course be raising large to try to get paid off with a hand that beats the board. I think I might turn a hand like ace king into a bluff raise, as I've got the best removal to king queen that I can have without having any kind of pair. Or a lot of these hands should just be called down if I don't have a few of them will be bluff raised to rep that nut straight with the queen, but I'm just going to go ahead and call this one and try to take the chop. I'm also risking running into a queen X himself in some cases there too, so I don't want to just start bluff raising everything. Funny how poker works, though. I start out with the absolute stone cold nuts and I end up calling for a chop against a hand that beats me. This new table in the lower left-hand corner, we've got a player playing 75 blinds deep in the immediate position of us, so he's probably a recreational. We also have a player playing 5-6 buy-ins deep that we're in position to. I'll stick around in case we can find a way to double or triple up and play in position against another big stack. And we've also got a suspected wreck on the other side of us, too. Against a raise from the cutoff and a button re-raise, I'm going to play my big blind cold 4-bet or fold, and pocket fours is just going to very clearly be in the fold portion of that breakdown. Under the gun, raises first in. We'll play 3-bet or fold from the small blind and not 3-bet middle suited connectors like 8-7 suited, so we'll just go ahead and fold that out. Use probably about a 7.5% range there. Something like 9s or better, ace-king, ace-queen, suited versions of ace-10, king-10, and queen-jack suited or better, and maybe ace-5 suited to have a suited wheel ace in the mix as well. 7.5%, somewhere in that range. Upper left-hand table, we have a recreational player on 30 blinds raises 5x, and then another particularly fishy recreational player cold calls that. I'm good, and I can get the tens in pre-flop at least against the shorter stack, so I'm going to go ahead and pop him up there. I'm probably only really doing this with like tens plus ace king, maybe ace queen suited as well to get in against the suspected fish rec type player, but I really can't have any bluffs against that guy. He goes ahead and calls me. We get an ace nine deuce two-tone board. He only has 4.5 blinds left in the pot of 58, so we're just going to go ahead and put him in for the rest of it and hope he didn't peel that ace. Of course, he did with ace seven. Lower left-hand table will range bet on the ace on the 10-3 deuce two-tone board in the big button versus small blind scenario. We've got a decent bit of showdown with our pocket fives on improve, which isn't always the case. So I'm going to go ahead and check this back. On that turn, we can have tens, nines, threes, deuces, all combos of 10-9. Both suited and offsuit, and then all kinds of straight draws, and flush draws, queen, king jack, queen jack, king jack, queen jack, king queen, 7-8, jack 8, 8-6 suited, that kind of stuff. No need to turn this hand into a bluff. These 10 high boards are often, pretty bluff happy, especially if they stay low. So I've got a reason to think that this hand can check down good, or maybe even bluff catch. The nine is, or the jack rather, is not a great card as it closes the flush and puts 3 to the straight out there. And even if you didn't hit a straight, those straight draws are now pairs in a lot of cases. I'm going to go ahead and try to figure out what we do here because that bet sizing is also pretty small. We can beat some hands like 4-5, 5-6, even though we block those, ace-4, ace-5. Let me take a look and see. That half pot bet is pretty bluffy. I think we'll call it down, even though I think I'm beat a lot of the time. Yeah, and he stumbled into king-queen, which is, a reasonable hand to play that way, I suppose. I think pre-flop should be 3-bet or full, but a lot of players call in the small blind, although I think calling king-queen offsuit starts to trend a bit more towards a fishy or recreational type player as opposed to a reg that's thinking about his ranges more thoroughly. But the flop action, check calling that king-queen with that gut shot and 2 overcards and a backdoor spade draw. He's got the spade, so he's got 3 to the flush. His flop play is not unreasonable, and his river value bet is good. But I think he probably also bluffs that particular hand if the river bricks out or pairs up or something like that where he doesn't improve. So my idea that those 10 high boards have a lot of bluffs in their range on the river is probably not unreasonable. We just didn't have our hand hold up that particular time, but that's okay. Lower right-hand table, get a 2.5x raise first in from the cutoff. We can defend our big blind with the hand like king-jack offsuit. No reason to 3-bet that. I would just go ahead and call it. Now, we get a small 1/3-ish type bet from who's probably a reg type player using software to give his bets a very specific sizing that's not rounded off. Against the smaller sizing, you usually start check raising more aggressively and more merged, so I'm actually going to go ahead and check raise my top pair, 1-pair hand here, as opposed to check calling it like I would do against a larger size. Lower left-hand table, we open ace-7 suited from middle position. Upper right-hand table, we're going to play 3-bet or fold. And let's see here. We can have maybe a 50-50 value bet to bluff ratio. I think I want a 4-bet call off queens plus. And I think I need to be a little bit tighter than 50-50 value to bluff ratio here. So I'm actually going to move ace-queen just outside of my cold 4-bet range and fold it. It's pretty close, though. Lower left-hand table, we're just going to go ahead and range bet on the jack 7-4 two-tone board with the big blind caller. Upper left-hand table, we're going to treat this like a cold 4-bet or fold situation with the limps and that pretty decent-sized isolation range. We're going to pop it up to 20, and we're going to have, let me see here, we'll have jacks plus. No, we'll have jacks plus to stack off with here. Jacks plus ace-king. Aces is, of course, a part of that range. And we'll probably have about a 50-50 range of value bets to bluffs. On the turn, when that queen that puts a double flush draw out there, I'm just going to go ahead and check back with my third pair top kicker and flush draw. Lower right-hand table, I'll check range out of position on queen 9-7. Let me see here. I have no real equity in this hand. I don't get a ton of folds on the turn, but I think I can go bet to get a lot of folds on the river. When I hit that ace for aces up on the lower left-hand table, I'm now going to go ahead and value bet that. I'm going to go ahead and range bet small against the call in the upper left-hand table with the aces. I'm going to go ahead and try to bluff him off hands like Jack 10, 9-10, 9-8, etc. Even though I did pair up, I don't think my pair has that much showdown value. So I'm going to go ahead and 2x pot him to fold him off all kinds of marginal one-pair showdown hands. This player flatted my flop bet. I'm going to go ahead and use my queens and my aces as a trap in that spot. Kings I would keep getting in. Ace-queen and king-queen suited could go either way, but I like trapping with the aces. Lower right-hand table, I'll just go ahead and bet small on Jack 9-7. And we'll, of course, call off with the aces here. Got him against queen 10, so he's drawing pretty thin against our overpair. We're happy to get our money in that spot as played. Pre-flop's where he got himself in trouble. He probably shouldn't be defending that large raise size as loose as queen 10 suited there, and that's where his mistake was made. Lower right-hand table, or lower left-hand table, we face a half-pot stab from an in-position player. I'm going to go ahead and call this once, but I'm not going to get involved too deeply in this particular formation with, my bottom pair. Lower right-hand table, that ace of spades peels off. I'd keep betting, flushes, naked ace of spades. I'd keep betting my queen 10 type hands for the most part. I'll fold to that second stab on the lower left-hand table. I'm not going to bet a draw as weak as ace-queen, no spade on the lower right-hand table, but I will go ahead and stab at the river. Some of my 10x hands can also be checked back to trap. My flushes are mostly bet on the turn, but I guess in theory I can have a few of those. On these 4 straight or 4 flush runouts, I'd like the pot size bet. Solver seems to like those on similar board texture runouts quite a bit as well, so I'm going to go ahead and try to mimic that to the extent possible. Upper left-hand table, under the gun limped. We isolate him with queen-jack offsuit. I'm not going to go ahead and bet all my gut shots on this board. I'm going to go ahead and check back the ones without the heart. I'll keep betting my aces, my kings, my pocket fives, my ace-king, my ace-5 suited, probably ace-queen, ace-jack type hands as well. Lower left-hand table, blind on blind, 8-5 suited is kind of near the cusp of a standard open. We're going to go ahead and open it. We're going to check range on 9-5-5 rainbow. We face this min bet on the turn. Trying to decide if there's any merit in raising that. I think I'm just going to go ahead and flat it. Lower left-hand table, I'm just going to go ahead and bet small with my 5x and plan to bet the river large if he calls me, try to put a Jack X hand in a bad spot. He just flat calls me. Now we'll go ahead and overbet. I don't think the Jack X can get away from this as played, at least not very often, so we're going to go ahead and do that. Plus, I'd overbet a lot of my various bluffs like 8-10, 8-10, various straight draws on the turn, 8-10 the most obvious one, 8-10 and queen 10, and we'll fold queen high facing that pot-sized river barrel. We got called down. I'm willing to bet he's got a hand like Jack X, like I was planning to target with the overbet, where I think he's going to be pretty inelastic with a hand like Jack X. He had a hand like Ace Jack, so he had a strong Jack. I don't think he should be folding that there. I think his call down is fine, but I'm happy to get the 2x pot in for value on the river as played. Upper right-hand table, player who's effectively middle position raises first in for 3x. On my button, I'm going to be playing 3-bet or fold, and I'm not going to 3-bet a pair as weak as pocket sixes, so we'll just go ahead and fold that. If you do want to have flats in your button range, a hand like pocket sixes is a prime candidate for it, though I think it's probably pretty marginal at best in these higher rake, low stakes games like 200 no limit, especially against a larger open size like a 3x open. Some merit to trying to get in there with these fishy blinds with the hand that could make a set on the button, so that would be a reason to go ahead and expand the range, but I just don't know that that really justifies calling a 3x open at the same time. Lower right-hand table, we open ace-queen suited from the button. I would probably expand my range here as well, just because the small blind is kind of a weak recreational player and the big blind's been passive. We'll go ahead and range bet on the queen 7-6 two-tone board. Get called. King of spades on the turn, putting out a backdoor flush draw. I can have kings, queens, 7, 6s, all combos of king, queen. I can have king 7 and king 6 suited. I can have queen 7 and queen 6 suited and 6, 7 suited, perhaps even 6, 7 offsuit as well. As well as aces, ace, king, king, jack, king 10. He should actually be either check raising a lot of those hands on the flop or 3-betting them pre-flop. So I think I can actually go ahead and use an overbet size. The rainbow flop means he may be more inclined to trap his sets like 6s or 7s. I'm not sure that talks me out of an overbet or overbet type scenario here completely. Either way, second pair top kicker is going to play a lot better as a check back type hand, especially if I'm using overbets, and even for the most part if I'm using more of a 2/3 sizing. So I'm content to check that back and try to bluff catch or try to value bet the river against pocket 8, 7, 8, 8, 9, some kind of queen X hand that doesn't have king queen, a worse queen. I think value betting this is completely standard and necessary as played. Really don't want to see a check raise here, but I'm not suspecting too many check raise bluffs, so I have to imagine I go ahead and just fold this if he check raises me any meaningful amount. Upper left-hand table will open 9-8 suited from the cutoff. Get called by a recreational player in the big blind and an ace, queen, 9 two-tone board. We'll go ahead and range bet small. Get instantly called. I can have aces, queens, 9s, even pocket 3s, ace, queen, ace, 9, ace 3 suited, queen 9 suited. A lot of those hands need to be check raised on the flop, or pocket 3s should probably be folded. Aces, queens, and for the most part, ace, queen, and 9s as well should also be re-raised pre-flop. I should have a nut advantage here is what this boils down to, which means I can be using overbet sizes. I would be overbetting in addition to those strong hands for the most part, with a few being traps, maybe like ace 3 suited and ace, in a set of aces top set. I could be overbet bluffing with my hands like Jack 10, various flush draws, especially combo flush draws, perhaps even some Broadway straight draws, particularly those with the club blocker to the flush draw as well. The 9x hand, I'm just going to go ahead and check back, though. His third pair does beat these draws and doesn't really get value from anything. The recreational player goes and bets half pot. That's usually very overbluffed. They have a hard time getting enough value bets in there with all the weak hands that they put there when they use that size, and they have to be very value heavy. I'm getting such a great price to call down. Paired rivers also trend overbluffed. With flush draw boards also trend overbluffed. He's going to have either ace-x or a queen-x type hand a decent bit here, but not enough to justify a fold. This is going to be a very easy call. Go ahead and call. I pay off ace-8, but I'm content to go ahead and pay off ace-8 right there to trap, and trap and snap off all his, all his jack-10, his busted flush draws, all his, weird Broadway draws that are going to be in his range that now don't have a pair. Upper right-hand table, it's a limped pot that I checked in from the big blind. I checked my range on Queen 9-7 two-tone, and the in-position player bets a little over 2x pot, and the small blind player calls. I'm just going to go ahead and fold my second pair for that size. Lower left-hand table, the player has been loose recreational in the big blind for this blind battle that's coming up, but not very aggressive. I'm going to go ahead and expand my range to include 5-4 offsuit. Even though he's loose, he's been passive and doesn't 3-bet me. And we're deep, so my hand, when it gets to the flop, has a chance to make some of those big hands, like a shady 2-pair or some straights where I can get a lot of value. So if this guy was weak, fishy, and passive, but short, I might not include a hand like 5-4 offsuit, but because he's also deep, in fact, he's 166 blinds deep, and we have him covered, I think it's just fine to go ahead and open that mid-lean, low mid-lean offsuit connector, just because I'm going to get to the flop so much, and I've got a chance to make a big hand when we're deep there. If I make the straight, I'm happy to get money in against that guy so deep, so I'm happy to have that hand in there in that spot. It's probably slightly looser than a standard open for me in a typical blind-on-blind situation. Lower right-hand table, we open ace-3 suited from middle position. Lower left-hand table, we open kings 10 offsuit also from middle position. Get called by both the blinds. On a 7-5 deuce rainbow board, we're not going to bet range, and we'll go ahead and check back a hand like king 10 with no real draws. We'll check in this limped pot with jack 3 suited the upper left-hand table. We'll check range on 10-7-3 rainbow lower right-hand table. Against that lead, I'm going to just go ahead and fold my king 10 overcards. If everyone checked to me a second time, I'd probably start stabbing. I will check call bottom pair with the nut flush draw. Also some merit to check raising that, but against a fish, I'm less inclined to check raise bluff. We face a 2/3 bet here. If we turn the flush in this limp pot on the upper left-hand table, we're going to fold our bottom pair to the second barrel on the lower right-hand table. Checks to us this time. We've got a player in position and out of position. I want to go ahead and try to get some value here. I think a king X has a hard time folding, especially from the rec, or if he stumbles into the 4 or a small flush as well. There's plenty of hands I can get value from for an overbet, so I'm going to go ahead and overbet this flush and hope somebody takes a marginal hand too far, especially the recreational player in position. Lower right-hand table, blind on blind, we can go ahead and open 7-6 suited, and the recreational player that was in position to us just left, so we're going to go ahead and leave this table too, as he was the only reason we were at this table. We're going to check range on king 9-4 rainbow. And now that we turn third pair, it has some showdown value, but it also has a lot of overcards that can outdraw it for free that don't really want to come along for a bet. Hands like ace-10, or we can at least charge by betting small. So I'm going to go ahead and put in the small bet with this hand. We get called, a 10 peels off on the river, trying to decide if there's any merit in turning this into a bluff versus checking it back, or trying to check it down. Fourth pair is really not that strong a hand. I can fold out some 9x type hands, maybe even some 10x type hands. Although I don't really have great removal to the straights that came in, the queen jack kind of hands, so I don't know that I want to use an overbet bluff. If I bluff, I don't want to bet small. I either want to overbet bluff here to fold out a 9 or a 10, or maybe even some kings, or I want to check. I'm going to go ahead and check this and put some hands with better removal to the straights in the overbet bluff range. This hand has a smidge of showdown value. I'll see if it'll manifest. I'd probably beat a hand like ace jack. So all my pontificating about bluffing was just to try to make a worse hand fold anyway. He had queen 4 of clubs, so I guess he had some showdown value on the flush draw. His line is pretty reasonable. Upper left-hand table will open 9s from the cutoff. These guys have been passive for the most part, so we're going to go ahead and open jack 7 offsuit from the button, even though that is not a standard open. Upper right-hand table, we got called by 3 players, 2 of which in position, so we're going to check range on that king 9-5 two-tone board. We got 3-bet a pretty decent size, almost 5x, 4.5x, 5x from the cutoff by the big blind with our pocket 9s. We can go ahead and call this particular hand. We're going to fold the jack 7 against the 3-bet, though. We're going to fold the pocket 10s against the bet and the call, 60% bet and the call. Pocket 9s are a pretty standard defense here, either in solver world or against the pool. We face a bet. We've got second pair on that 10 high board. We can, even though it's a pretty decent sized bet for a 3-bet pot, we can go ahead and call at least one barrel here. The 10 is a good card as it should slow him down and it doesn't improve any of his hands that we were currently ahead of on the flop. Even his overpairs should be slowing down on that 10 because I can have so much 10x in my range that just is not interested in folding now that I've hit trips in a 3-bet pot. Blind on blind, lower left-hand table, we'll just defend for a call with ace-10 offsuit. And we can fold our small blind against the button, raise first in. And we face that small bet, which we'll just call in position with the pair of aces, ace-10. Against this small turn bet, I'm a bit suspicious that he's got a stronger overpair in his range from the size up on the flop and the fact that he continues barreling, but it's just too strong a hand to fold to that second barrel. So I'm going to go ahead and call that and get to the river. Now, I don't really have very many bluffs anymore. There's almost some merit in turning 9s into a bluff as played. And we peeled top 2 in the blind battle lower left-hand table. I'm going to start betting that versus the check. I think I probably just want to check this down and not try to get him to fold an overpair if he checks to me. But I'm trying to think what bluffs I would have. Now, he bets that small size again. If I've got a boat, if I've got pocket 6s, which I guess I could have quad 10s for sure, which of course I'm just going to raise all in. My raise size is going to be raise all in for any raises, both value and for bluffs, because I'm really only going to be raising. I think I would raise all in with the flushes as well. I'm not that worried. I'm not that worried about him having a boat as played. There's just not that many combos I expect to be in his pre-flop 3-bet range. First of all, this kind of funky sizing to me is not really bluff heavy. It's more like an overpair trying to get paid off. Trying to decide what I should do here. I just don't see it as being a bluff very often. I'm content to fold that, even though I'm trying to think through what I should do there. His sizings put me in odd spots. I don't mind his sizing structure that he used. I just feel like that's a hand like jacks, queens, kings, aces, trying to get thin value from middling pairs so often against my bluff catchers, of which a large portion of my range is one-pair bluff catcher hands. I think his play is probably pretty good there. Now blind on blind, he raises me first in. I'm going to go ahead and 3-bet this aggressively, probably something like 17-18% of hands, including ace-king. A pair is 9 or better, suited broadways, ace-king, ace-queen, suited connectors, and then a smattering of suited hands as well, and some offsuit hands are not quite good enough to call. Just so I've got some hands all over the board, give me all sorts of coverage in a very wide, aggressive blind on blind 3-bet range. That nines hand is pretty close because of the small sizing, but I just think I'm running into value so often. I just don't think he really bluffs for that sizing nearly often enough, and the MDA tends to back that up, even if it's close. Lower left-hand table, we faced an under-the-gun raise first in and then a middle position 3-bet. If it gets back to us unchanged, everyone else folding, we're going to treat our big blind like a cold 4-bet or fold situation, which it is. I can stack off with queens or better in that spot. Ace-jack is in consideration for being a cold 4-bet bluff here as well. You know, the sizing I want to use is going to be about 24, 25 blinds. So I probably don't even want to have a 50-50 ratio of value bets to bluffs. I think I want to have more like 60-40, 70-30. Ace-jack is going to be in that range as a cold 4-bet bluff, but it's right around the cusp of it. You know, if you wanted to go ahead and fold that and play a bit more cautiously, I don't think that's the end of the world either. And when we get jammed on, however, we're just going to go ahead and fold. Lower right-hand table, we open threes from middle position, get called by a recreational player on the button, then we check range on Jack 6-7 two-tone. 9 peels on the turn. I'm just going to go ahead and use a small bet, then a large river overbet bluff to try to fold him off all kinds of one-pair hands. I'm going to open blind on blind the upper left-hand table with 8-6 offsuit, just on the idea that the player pool is probably not aggressive enough to punish me for opening a bit on the loose side. When I get raised on the lower right-hand table against the rec, I'm just going to be done with the hand. I'm just going to go ahead and pitch the threes. Over here on the lower upper right-hand table, we stab the turn with our queen high flush draw. The ace peels off, so the ace high flush draw is now no longer a nut bluff hand. So the queen high flush draw that bricked is going to be our best bluff hand. I'm going to use that in my overbet size. I'm going to fold out lots of king X and 10X, I think, right there with the ace peeling on the river. However, when he makes aces and sevens two pair, he's probably going to call me down like he did. Upper left-hand table, we get a recreational player limps the cutoff, a small blind complete, and we'll check in the big blind with our queen 9. Upper right-hand table, we're going to play more or less 3-bet or fold from the button against this cutoff raise first in, and 9-7, so that it's just going to be a little bit too weak for us to put in that 3-bet range of about 13, 14% of hands. Upper left-hand table, that recreational player that limped the cutoff now goes ahead and bets. It looks like about a 75% bet on the flop. We're going to go ahead and check call with our queen 9 top pair and continue checking when that 10 peels off on the turn. Now that he checks, I'm just going to go ahead and check again and try to check down my 9. Hope I've got some showdown value here, which I should, and hope he lets me realize it and doesn't blast at that 4 straight board. You know, if I had a weaker pair like a 5 or a 7, I might turn that into a bluff. I think the 9X has some decent showdown against his flop stabs. Let's see, he bets a half pot size, which is pretty bluffy, but these 4 straight rivers are not, so that undoes a lot of the bluffiness of that particular sizing. And the bet check bet line, however, is pretty bluffy. This is fairly marginal, but I'm going to go ahead and call it just because the sizing in that broken aggression line tends to be bluffy, even if the board texture itself is not. He had 2 pairs. He went for some, on the thinner side of value on the river. I think I actually kind of like his bet there as played. I think it's okay to try to show down there, though, just because of the sizing in the broken aggression line, but it's pretty marginal. It's probably not a highly profitable call, but I think it's still a call you should be making, especially against a recreational player, of which this player certainly is, playing 55-1 with 60% limps over 79 hands. Lower right-hand table, we'll open 8s on the button. We've got what's probably a rec playing 46-0, 75% limps over 13 hands on a half stack in the small blind, and 100%, 20%, 90% limp player in the big blind also. Also both recs. Now we get min 3-bet and then min 4-bet. I'm just going to go ahead and fold. I was happy to call the min 3-bet because the action would be closed, but against this player who could just reship, I'm just going to get out of the way and not trap any more of my money in that pot, which turned out to be a good plan. Upper left-hand table, that rec limps under the gun. We're going to isolate from the button with something like our cutoff raise first in range, a 27-28% range, of which includes pocket aces. It was ace-king versus queen-10 over there. The queen-10 player is getting awfully wacky as played. The ace-king player I understand entirely. We'll fold the upper right-hand table with a multi-way action even against that min-bet. Upper left-hand table, just go ahead and start betting the flop small on the 7-5-3 two-tone board. King on the turn, he did not check raise, which tells us he's probably not very strong on the flop. I want to go ahead and start using overbet sizes if he checks to me. Let's see, an overbet of 24, 63, and an overbet of 24 is very reasonable. It sets me up to have about a 1.5x river overbet shove, I believe, as well. Somewhere in that range, a smaller overbet, not a massive overbet. So I like the SPR that's going to set up the stack pot ratio using this size. I've got king 7s, 5-3s. I don't think he has very many of those combos based on limp calling and then check calling the flop and checking the turn. So I think there's a nut advantage which justifies blasting away. I wouldn't even be surprised if a recreational player like this guy goes ahead and calls a lot of bets with hands like 5-4, 7-6, pair and gut shot type hands that just doesn't believe me and is not being very sensitive to the sizing that I use on the turn. So I'm content to try to use that overbet size to get more value with my aces in that scenario. Lower right-hand table, we've got 9-6 suited in the cutoff. That's a bit outside my standard open range. The button is extremely loose, playing every hand. We're not likely to have position. The big blind has been aggressive so far with this 3-betting, and neither of the blinds are particularly loose. I'm going to go ahead and not expand my range under those circumstances and fold the 9-6 suited. In fact, given how loose and fishy the button is and how loose the blinds are and how aggressive the big blind is, I might even go ahead and actually contract my range and play my cutoff tighter than I typically would, which is not something that comes up very often, but it's pretty rare I find myself with a 100% VPIP fish on the button directly ahead of me, 2 loose blinds with an aggressively 3-betting big blind in there as well. So given that the scenario is pretty unusual, I'll adapt and play in a pretty unusual way. Lower right-hand table, we'll open ace-queen suited from middle position. Expect this player to call as he does with every other hand, which he does. He's also 3-bet a decent bit too, which is worth keeping a note of. So he's very loose and very active pre-flop, calling or raising everything, limping when you give him the chance to limp. We're going to go ahead and check range to him on Jack 8-10 Rainbow. Not folding with that double gut shot straight draw, of course, but just going ahead and checking our range to keep our range together, keep it smart and easy to play. He checks the turn, or he checks the flop rather to the turn. We peel off an 8. I'm going to go ahead and use an overbet size here just because I'm very happy to hit a 9 or hit a king. I've got a pretty strong draw, lots of cards that make a very strong hand. And I don't know that he's really all that strong, having checked back the flop there with all kinds of nonsense in his pre-flop range, a lot of which I can fold out. If you want to go ahead and bet that small, I think that's also reasonable, but I think betting on that turn is pretty mandatory, both in a vacuum and with what we know about this player. Our recreational friend limps the middle position. We get a isolation raise and a large cold 4-bet to 19, or I guess that's a large 3-bet rather. I really can't even cold 4-bet for any meaningful size that allows me to fold. This is a jam or fold spot right here, and I'm probably just going to be jamming queens plus ace king. This guy's been so aggressive you might talk me into doing it with jacks as well, but I think that would be a bit non-standard. That one's kind of close, but queens plus ace king, my chips are going in the middle at this point, just all in. You know, to pick up those 25, 26 blinds that are already laying out there, and I just don't have any other move. I'm not calling with 2 players left to act behind me, a 19 blind raise, and I've only got 1 blind in the pot. I'm not raising any size because there's no size I can justifiably raise back at this guy that's also small enough that allows me to fold to a jam. My only move at that point is all-in or fold, so I'm just going to all-in or fold in a pretty tight range, something like queens plus ace king. This guy turned out to be pretty strong as he jams over the top of all that, and both players fold out. This guy is obviously very special, limp calling the raise and the re-raise to 19 blinds, then folding versus that jam. I can't imagine this guy sitting out for any reason why he ever would, given that he's got position on this player right here. But it's what happened. This player now, he goes and he raises up pretty big, probably because he knows how loose and fishy this guy is. Normally, I would be using something like a queens plus range or better to stack off with here. However, because this guy is causing this dynamic to change, I'm going to go ahead and include jacks in that range as well. Let's see here. What size do I want to use? A cold 4-bet size is going to be something like 20 blinds. We'll go ahead and do that. Cold 4-bet him here. Expect this guy to put some money in as well just because it's what he does. Against this small 3-bet, but in a tight formation against a shorter stack player, I'm just going to go ahead and fold the 6s. If this guy was deeper stacked, I would come along, but I don't make nearly as much money when I hit my set and net pot this time, so I'm just going to go ahead and fold that kind of small pair in a tight formation. Upper left-hand table, we have a loose aggressive button behind my cutoff and a dead small blind and a reasonably aggressive 3-betting big blind. So I'm not going to go ahead and expand my range with king 9, which is slightly outside my standard cutoff open. Upper right-hand table, the button raises first in. We're going to go ahead and re-raise the small blind with a standard 15% type range, including ace-king offsuit. Probably got pocket pairs like 5 or 6s or better, suited broadways, suited 9x, ace-x suited type hands, ace-jack, ace-king, ace-queen, king-queen, and maybe 9-8 suited, some hands like that. We'll go ahead and range bet small on the 9-4-5 rainbow board. We can continue barreling if we pick up an ace or a king or a spade to bluff the backdoor spade draw should the spade peel off on the river. The jack, I don't think I will barrel this particular combo. I've got hands like queen 10 to barrel as a bluff, as well as king queen suited and king queen off. I've got 9s and 5s and jacks. I'd probably trap with my set of jacks, but I've also got my overpairs that can keep betting. I think ace-king is probably just going to have a bit too much showdown value that could possibly go check-check for the rest of the way down here and showdown good against a weaker ace-high. I've also got better bluff candidates with more equity to keep barreling the turn with. So I think I can put ace-king into the checking range in this particular spot. Now he bets small. I can have jacks that I trap with. I could trap with my aces here because aces isn't worried about overcards. I could trap with my set of jacks because jacks are going to be pretty strong, and I probably put those into check call lines. Ace-king is pretty close as far as if I want to go ahead and call or fold this. I mean, I've got 6 outs to a top pair, top kicker type hand, which is probably good, and I'm getting such a great price. I'm getting 4-1. With a smidge of showdown value, this is certainly close. I really don't like check calling with ace high and 3-bet pots out of position, so I'm going to go ahead and fold it, but it's very close. Lower right-hand table, we completed a small blind against a recreational player limper. The big blind checks in. We've got queen 7 suited and flop a flush. We check our range. The recreational player that limps min bets. I'm going to go ahead and put in a raise to try to start getting some value from random spades, ace-x type hands, etc., etc. I don't normally use large sizings, on these monotone boards or after check raises, but here there's a lot of money behind this. I've got the second nuts. I'm against a weak player that's probably going to get too sticky with all kinds of silly hands. I think I may put in a 2x bet here on the turn to give me a chance to really win a big pot on the river if this guy gets overly sticky with some kind of weaker flush or ace-x kind of hand. Now 4 to the straight ran off. I've got about 1.5x pot. I've still got the second nuts. He could have stumbled into a 3. He could have a smaller flush. He could get overly sticky with his ace because he's a fish. I'm just going to go ahead and jam this and hope I can have somebody pay me off with something he shouldn't. He snap calls me. I win a full stack in a limp pot that I really shouldn't do. Really shouldn't have a chance of winning that much money without much money in pre-flop. He was against ace-5, so he made 2 pair, but my thought that board is going to have, or not so much the board, but the player is a weak fish playing 63-0 and limping, might overplay hands and let me get some value. That's why I use those larger sizings. That's why I picked up a stack there. Upper right-hand table, we get the cutoff raise first in. We're going to go ahead and 3-bet or fold from the button. We're going to 3-bet a hand like pocket 8s and even some weaker pairs like 7s and 6s. Along with our suited broadways, our suited 9x, our suited wheel aces 2 through 5, and ace-king, ace-queen, ace-jack, king-queen. Lower left-hand table, under the gun open, middle position call. We're going to squeeze with a similar range to our 3-bet versus under the gun range, which is going to include ace-queen offsuit and king-queen offsuit. It's about an 8.5% range. This is some of the weakest hands in my range right here is the king-queen offsuit, but I think it's still fine to go ahead and squeeze with. I also don't mind getting a call from this guy who's probably fishy, calling in middle position and playing on a 55-60 blind stack. So I can make top pair against that guy and feel pretty good about that. Upper right-hand table, we open the 7s from the cutoff. And we face a queen 10 king monotone flop. We don't have the relevant suit. Big blind is in that pot. He checks to us. I'm going to go ahead and range bet this board small. Just a lot of his smaller pairs or non-heart or smaller heart hands are just going to have to go ahead and fold. I'm probably not going to put too much money into this pot. I at least not on the turn. I may find a bluff on the river, especially on that four straight run out where I can have all kinds of ace-x hands. I can put his 2-pair hands or weird heart hands in a bad spot. On the 4 straight or 4 flush runouts, I'd like using a pot size bet for a bluff. I'm going to have to use my smaller pairs here as I just have, my larger pairs have some degree of showdown value pairing up with the board. Against the 4-bet on that king-queen hand, I could just, of course, go ahead and fold. This is one of my weakest 3-bet hands, but it's fine to go ahead and pop them up there even though it didn't work. It doesn't work all the time. Upper right-hand table, we raise the cutoff with king-9 suited. That's pretty standard. Lower right-hand table, we raised 10s from the cutoff, got called by the fishy player in position, as well as that aggressive regular type player who's out of position. I'm going to be checking range if he checks to me. Against the lead, he's probably trying to get value in there and not give a chance for this to check back against the fish. There's no reason for me to go ahead and get involved with the marginal hand like pocket 10s on this board. I can have all the sets. I can have ace-9, ace-7 suited, 9-7 suited. I can have various good pairs of aces and various good straight draws and flush draws. I can fold the marginal hand like the pocket 10s, especially with the fish behind me who's going to come along with all kinds of stuff. Lower left-hand table, button raises first in. We're going to 3-bet something like a 14% range, including our suited broadways like Jack Queen suited. So we're going to go ahead and pop him up there. Upper left-hand table, we'll just check fold our gut shot versus the pot size bet in the limp pot with no back doors. Lower right-hand table, we'll open 10-9 suited from middle position. We got called in position by the big blind. We're going to go ahead and range bet small on the 10-3 deuce two-tone board. There's lots of cards that give us additional equity we can barrel, either top pair type hands, straight draws, or flush draws. Plus, it's hard for him to connect with that board too meaningfully. We just picked up an open-ended straight draw with 9-10, so this, of course, is going to be a prime barreling hand. If we use a half pot bet, we're going to put about a 68 size blind river pot with about 65 behind us, set up a real nice pot size bluff jam or value jam if we complete our straight. So we're going to go ahead and use that sizing. His 10x hands, it's hard for him to have some of the 10x combos because now we block. I guess we don't block the suited combos of Jack 10 or Queen 10 because the 10 of hearts is on the board. That said, our hand has no showdown value. We do block 10x to some extent if he has any of these offsuit queens, Queen X or 10x hands. He's going to have lots of hands like pocket 8s down through pocket 5s that won't be able to call the triple barrel. We can also fold out busted draws. He snap folds. I don't like giving up the river without showdown value, and there's a prime example of why. Upper left-hand table, we have a recreational player who hasn't raised at all, one hand so far, 1%, one hand out of 89 chances. We're not going to 3-bet this guy light at all, and I'm not going to be, well, given that we're a bit deep, we have a prime hand to call, and he's very, very fishy and probably also strong. I'm going to take a flop in position where I normally don't call a 3x open no matter what, just because of rake and pot odds. However, because this guy's so fishy and his range is so clearly defined, I'm going to deviate from what I usually do and call this and try to play a pot in position against a guy who may make mistakes post-flop if I can flop gin. Lower left-hand table, we open blind down blind with the ace-9 offsuit, and we're actually going to start shutting down our tables and wrap the session up here when we get through the next orbit. We're going to fold against that 3-bet in the blind down blind with ace-9, especially against that larger 3.5 or 4x type 3-bet in position. We can fold Jack-Deuce in the upper right-hand table against the 2.5x button raise first in our big blind. No reason to defend a hand that weak. The recreational player bets a third pot. We have top pair, backdoor straights, and flush draws. I'm content to call that at least one barrel, especially for that small size and all the money still behind us. The blinds fold out, so now we're heads up against the rec. We have a gut shot and second pair when that king of spades shows up on the turn. He bets half pot. Our hand is probably not good, but queens and tens are pretty decent hands. I think it's okay to peel against this guy a second time, even though, once again, his preflop range is very narrowly defined because of how tight he is. If you want to go ahead and fold this hand because of how narrowly defined his range is, I certainly understand that as well. Lower left-hand table, we isolate against the poster with pocket 10s from under the gun. Against this triple barrel from the fish, even against the half pot, because he's been so passive, I'm going to go ahead and fold this and not call down, even though that half pot bet is super, super bluffy. This guy, just hard for him to have. He needs specifically ace-queen. He plays that way, which I don't buy. He's got as much more ace-king. I'm out of that one. Lower left-hand table, we've got the limp, an isolation, a call. I'm going to go ahead and treat this like a cold 4-bet or fold situation. Let me see here. That's going to put 24 out there. It's a little bit on the loose side, but I think I can do it. And over on the turn, the river I got there, he called the second turn barrel, the overbet. We got about a pot-sized bet left. I should have sized my turn down a little bit, but it's okay. We'll just jam all in here at this point with the middle set. Try to get paid off by any kind of Queen X that just does not believe me. Hope he didn't walk into that with 8-7. Only the rec calls me after limping. I'm going to go ahead and range bet him small. I've got a gut shot, an overcard, a backdoor flush draw, and I can fold him off all kinds of stuff, so I'm going to go ahead and put that small bet in there. He calls me. I'm not going to keep bluffing this guy very heavily just because he's such a weak player. Against some players, if I had the ace ten of spades where I've got that combo draw, I would probably just ship in for 1.5x. I guess there'd be some merit to using a real small size and to trap him if I've got a strong hand like ace king or king queen as well. Against this guy, however, I'm just going to check. He's probably going to let me get cheap or free river cards an awful lot and probably not fold any kind of pair too much. So I'm not going to go ahead and continue blasting this guy. And then when he goes and bets, even though it's a pretty small bet, I've got a gut shot and an overcard. It's a fairly weak hand. I'm content to actually just go ahead and fold this one, as I just don't know how else I fold this guy off. And I'm drawing pretty thin. Weird hand. I don't love the result, but I think that the thought process was okay up so far. And I've got all kinds of king X hands I can continue with there as well. I've got king queen, probably even king 10 suited in that particular spot. We're going to go ahead and raise the button with queen 7 suited. Our other tables are broke, so it's just down to the one with the very special player that's still left. Ace 8-6 rainbow board. If he checks to us, I'm going to go ahead and range bet small. I'm going to be barreling a lot of turns where I pick up either a diamond flush draw or some kind of straight draw. The ace pairing turn, I'm never folding the guy like this off trip aces, so I'm not going to be bluffing him so lightly. I'm only going to be continuing to bluff with my open-ended straight draws and my flush draws, essentially, against this kind of fish. A 7x even gives me a smidge of showdown value. I even beat the 6x. I'm content to go ahead and check this hand down now. I'm not trying to get him to fold trip aces. I'm not trying to get him to even fold an 8. I'm happy to take my 7 showdown. And he backed into a gut shot straight draw with 9-5 offsuit. You know, these guys can have anything, but not bluffing with a hand with as much showdown value there as queen 7 is clearly the right move. And it saved me from getting another bet in or even getting check raised against this guy when he stumbled into a straight. He min raises my cutoff open when I've got ace 10 offsuit. I, of course, am going to go ahead and call for that price and that sizing. Going to be somewhat cautious with my pair of aces, so I'm just going to check back the flop the first time. I will start betting the turn against this guy if he doesn't put any money in himself. He could have a better ace, but not necessarily. He overbets the turn, which makes me think he's a bit more inclined to be strong. However, with the top pair against a guy that can have so much stuff in his range, I can't be folding, at least not quite yet. We want to get to the river. The ace is a great card for me, as now it's a lot harder for him to have a better ace. There's so many fewer combos available that does it. He bets 20 into 33. As played, I think there's no other move but just call this down. Raising's a bit too reckless, and folding's way too nitty against this guy. So we will call. Hopefully he doesn't have ace-king. He had ace-6, so he made the full house. But our play is just fine, even though it didn't work out for us because he ended up reverse dominating us when he paired up on the turn. But I'm content with our play. He throws up the sunglasses. He's having a good time. But as long as the Recs are having a good time, I'm having a good time too. And looking at some of my session stats, kind of an on-fun, frustrating session in some ways. We weren't getting to showdown nearly as much as we usually do. We weren't winning at showdown nearly as much as we usually do. We weren't winning money when we saw the flop as much as we usually do. Those are all pretty bad formulas. We didn't win a single hand when we called the river, and we had to fold the river a lot more often than we typically do. That said, despite all those frustrating things that cut against us, we are showing a small profit cash-wise, a little less than half a buy-in, and a little more than a buy-in in EV-adjusted winnings for the all-in pots. So I think I'll take it, all things considered. And this is Charlie Murphy signing off. I hope you enjoyed the session. I will see you next time.